Hi guys, I'm Miss Christine. You probably know me from church. And Miss Carmel asked me to tell some Bible stories so you had something to listen to on your computers or your phones while we're all sheltering in place. What an odd time we're living through. It's really kind of sad and lonely. I bet you really miss your friends and you miss seeing your grandparents if you're not able to see them. And yeah, I really miss my church friends too, and my grandchildren. It's really hard. Um, but let's talk about someone else who spent a lot of time alone. We're going to talk about David today, and I love telling stories, especially to children, from God's Word, from the Bible. So I just want to remind us all that the Bible are words that God told men to write down so that we could know Him. And that everything in the Bible is stuff that God told us. And it's things that are about Him. It's wisdom about life and the best way to live our lives. It's future. There's things in the Bible that tell us what's going to happen in the future. And yeah, there's so much good stuff in the Bible. Well, you've probably heard of David. You know, he became a king. But before he became a king, he was a little boy, just like you are a little boy or a little girl. And he came from a large family. He had 7 older brothers and a couple sisters. And they lived in Israel, which was God's special land that He gave the Israelites. And his whole idea was the Israelites were His people, the people that knew Him, the only living God. And anybody else who believed in the holy living God, the only living God, could come and be part of Israel too and worship God. But most of the people worshiped other gods. And they didn't know the real God. But David did, and his family and the people in Israel. Well, let's see. David was the youngest of 7 brothers. And because he was the youngest, he got the worst job. He got to be the shepherd. Now that sounds pretty fancy, but it was a lot of hard work. And he was only a little boy. He was maybe 9, 10, 11, maybe 12. And he was a shepherd, and he lived out in the fields and took care of the sheep. He slept there in the fields every night by himself. He didn't have anybody out there with him. He was the shepherd. And in those days, the sheep that they raised did everything. They were a special kind of sheep that they could use the meat to eat. They could drink the milk. They used the wool to make their wool and weave their clothes. Sorry, they used the oil. Every part of the sheep they used. Well, Israel was near the Mediterranean Sea, so there's water near Israel. But in the middle of Israel, and it's a pretty small area compared to the United States, in the middle of Israel. Do you think it was really beautiful with lots of green grass and lots of waterfalls and rivers so the sheep always had something to eat? It wasn't. Here's what it looked like. Can you see that picture? These are pictures of goats, but this is really taken in Israel currently during now times, and it was beautiful in some places, but it was also dry and lots of rocks and little pieces of brush and sagebrush that the sheep grazed on. And so the shepherd's job was to watch the sheep and take them from place to place so they had more grass to eat and to find water for them to drink and take care of them. They also had to protect them because sometimes at night there might be a bear or a lion that decided they wanted one of the lambs or one of the sheep for food, and the shepherds had to protect their animals. And David, we know, it tells us later in the Bible that David actually had to fight bears and lions to protect his sheep. And he did it because he was a good shepherd. Well, he spent lots and lots and lots of time alone. But you know, when he looked up at the sky and he saw all the stars, and in the daytime he saw the sun come up, and he saw the sun rise, and he saw it set, and he saw the moon, and he saw the movement of the stars, and he saw how God provided places for his sheep to eat and have water. He knew God. he didn't just hang out and complain. He looked to God and he talked to God and he sang songs to God because he had a heart for God. And this is a very important thing to remember about David. He was, even as a boy, he had a heart for God. And I'm going to read a couple short passages that tell us why we know that. One of my favorite verses that David wrote in the Psalms is Psalm 4:8, because sometimes when I'm alone at night, I get scared, even as a grown-up sometimes. And this verse, David wrote, "In peace I will both lay down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, makes me to dwell in safety." He really knew that, didn't he? God alone makes him dwell in safety. And that's the same for us. Well, I also like this verse, or these verses. When I look at the heavens and I look at the work that you did with your own fingers, when I look at the moon and the stars and you have made them and ordained them, what am I, a man, that you take thought of us? The Son of Man, that thou dost care for him. Yet you have made us just a little lower than God. And you crown him, man, with majesty and glory. You make man to rule over all the works of your hands, God. You've put everything under our feet, all the sheep, all the oxen, all the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, the fish of the sea, whatever passes through the paths of the sea. O Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Doesn't it sound like David really got God? He really got God. He really knew who he was, and he recognized that he made everything and he had a reason for everything. Another really short thing that he said, and there's lots of things he said because there's 150 Psalms, but he says, "In your presence, God, is fullness of joy." It's not what we have. It's not even when we're with family or without family. God can give us joy all the time because it's in his presence that he gives us joy. And he says it's in God's hands that are the pleasures forever. So David, even as a boy, had a heart for God. Don't forget that.